No, a lot of years of experience go into that. That's how you put together an offer.
The premise is from the lens of an investment buyer. We've done a discovery call already, and we've decided together that turnkey new construction would be the best fit for that client, and they're either local or out of province. For this scenario, especially because a lot of our clients are from out of province, maybe that's the lens that we look at. So we've done the discovery call, and now we're ready to send them a couple of offerings. So let's start with how our offerings come together.
You know, initially when looking at the different opportunities after learning about the needs and wants of each individual investor, that we're able to explore the different projects, you know, taking into consideration what the timelines look like, the budgetary means, return expectations. So all those factors kind of help us lead into the next steps of reviewing what those offers and opportunities look like.
For my portion as for the project manager, we essentially take a ton of the market feedback from our property managers. Also, obviously, the builders. We kind of worked on which locations, which floor plans, what the best specification usage is, and sort of evaluate all that on an ongoing, at minimum annual basis, if not pretty much every time a project. So we kind of do a project, we do a post-mortem on it, take all that feedback and try to continually improve the specification, continually improve the floor plan, all the quality of life improvements that we can put in there so that tenants are in there long term, for the property managers to make the maintenance as low as possible. So very comprehensive evaluation of everything to make sure that it's as seamless as possible. A lot of the turnkey we put into it, including, you know, simple things that still to this day can have stuff forgot about, like for instance address plaque. So got to make sure that we have everything included, you know, everything that's possible. And yeah, then ongoing solutions for, you know, future progressive policies. There's stuff going on with the GST enhanced rebate. We got to figure out the best usage of the product for that. There's things going on with energy efficiency policies going on there, so we want to try and utilize that, and all of it's to reverse engineer to provide the best ROI with the lowest possible maintenance required for the properties, and make sure that there's a good specification there that down the road, when you're looking at the disposition of the asset, it's still very much a saleable ongoing product, because that's at the end of the day, that's where the equity is going to be taken out, is on the sale of the product. So
I think it's worth pointing out, Shane, too, your construction experience, more than a decade of that experience, and inputting it into these new projects that we've got coming up. You know, we're taking information from past tenants, from past clients, current clients, property managers, and implementing that feedback.
Yeah, I would say it's a good point, because there's a lot of, you know, particular investor real estate teams out there, right? And there's a lot of unfortunately, a lot of realtors get painted with this brush that they just kind of go ask the builder, what's for sale? Like, what will you sell me? What can I get a listing on? And I think with my background and just our team's background that have kind of been fostered through, like a lot of our teams fostered through the new construction world as builder reps at one point in time. My technical knowledge of worked a lot with these builders. So a lot of times I have like literally 20-year relationships with some of them that I've known for a long time. So they don't really look at me as someone that's anymore, just like a peer. So that's sort of a positive thing that kind of looked at as a peer. So when I bring forward feedback or bring forward, it's from a place speaking the language that they're used to. It's a place that they're familiar with, as that I've got a background in building science. I got a background with new construction in general. So a lot of this feedback gets received in the proper way because it's in the language that they're familiar with, you know, and it's not all about making it just prettier and cheaper, right? That's a lot of the quote unquote solutions for things. So yeah, that's a good point, because it's not always that they have someone that's, frankly, our team, I kind of consider we're part of their business development team to help them really service the investor market. And that's not again, a lot of people out there, so that it's like they want to have residual business as an account-based business. We look at it, we want to continually help our investors grow their net worth, so they end up continuing to buy, obviously, from builders that treat them well, you know, providing, you know, good product, you know, that they're the least headaches for them, and you know, getting the best ROI. So they recognize that, and they see that strategy, and that's why we have strong alliances with them, and that's why they continue to give us, you know, opportunities that we do. So, and we've obviously fostered a lot of relationships with their builders that are developers as well, so that land position for those first opportunities in pioneering subdivisions and stuff come to us very early in the process. And when I mean very early, I mean a lot of times it's 2 or 3 years away, some of these projects, and we're talking about, you know, what kind of opportunities make sense for that land usage, and that gives us that scalability, number one. And then number two, a lot of times, like much like the enhanced GST rebate, some of the design of providing the best product is going to be incorporated in the land, not just the build form and the specifications. So we're going to have to get creative with some of the land usage and how we structure it. So yeah.
I guess to further more on the offering side of it too, as the investor maybe becomes a little bit more interested or focused on a specific project or property or area in Edmonton and surrounding neighborhoods, in some cases, you know, the opportunity to visit a project or come see the land, see the dirt, do a tour of a property, take a look at some different existing projects, is also a great way that we could spend a day and really kind of the initial stages of that due diligence, just really understand and help wrap your head around what that project will look like. You know, that doesn't always fall into line, as many of the investors that we work with are remote, and where we have the capacity and the capability to just present online. We have very thorough due diligence done already on marketing packages, you know, going through the numbers and making sure that cash flow pro formas, as well as you know, different financial pro formas, do match and make sense in a way that the investor can understand, but then also to ensure that it is really what they are looking for in their real estate investment journey. So
fantastic. So after kind of established criteria and goals, and we've sent over, let's say, a couple of brochures that kind of fit that discussion, and let's say they come back to us and they land on a certain project and they want to look at next steps, where do they go from there?
So I can speak to this portion. Basically, when investors are giving us a verbal commitment, this is an exciting part of the whole process. It means that, you know, we are working with people who are committed to improving their financial future and the future of their families. So that's really satisfying. What happens is that investors give us, they have to transfer to the builder $1,000 per title to secure their verbal commitment on the project. And that secures them 30 days to do their due diligence, and it's a conditional commitment. In these 30 days, they have an opportunity to review client relationship documents, purchase documents. They review all the numbers and cash flow with their trusted mortgage advisor, who also reviews their personal net worth statement and puts together a really comprehensive package for financing. And they usually have, in that 30 days period, due diligence period, our investor clients have a very good understanding of how much they qualify for, what the loan to value is. They get a comfort letter from their mortgage advisor, and using that information, they're able to we are able to transition to the next period in this whole process, which is the unconditional commitment. At the mark of 30 days of due diligence, the clients, if they're comfortable with everything, they see the numbers, the comfort letter from their mortgage advisor, they're able to remove condition at that point. And at the removal of conditions, they need to provide 10% deposit of the purchase price to the builder. And the nice part about the due diligence period and the verbal commitment is that if the project is not the right fit for the investor, their initial 1,000 per title deposit gets returned to them. And usually builder returns deposits within 30 days of providing them with a written notice that there is no commitment. So that's the conditional commitment and unconditional commitment. Did I miss anything, guys?
No, that was great. That was great. The only thing I would note as well is just for a lot of times, it's just another set of eyes. We have, a whole team between support and myself to make sure that the offering that was originally conceived is reflected in the purchase agreements as best as possible. So there's having a set of eyes to kind of make sure, we try to have those inclusions. So it's a combination of not just on the client, there's obviously their agent, there's our admin staff, and as well our support staff, and as well as myself, to try to make sure that there's a full set of eyes, because at the end of the day, that's effectively the offering is summarized in those purchase agreements. So we want to make sure that expectations are being met as best as possible. So having a whole team reviewing it rather than just a client having to contend with that themselves, because sometimes those could be an overwhelming amount of documents, and there is some skepticism around, well, if you don't really know the builder or what have you, are they making sure that everything's in there that they expect? And so it's a full set of eyes with a lot of different expertise to evaluate all together and support that process. So.
And that's such a great point, Shane, because I can even speak from, an investor's point of view. When I was working as an investor with this team, that's exactly what was happening, right? There's a whole team behind to support our clients. I remember having conversations with you and how you were able to, help me out on some things, and conversations with Drew and, Kevin. And so that's the nice part. And what I love about working with our team as an agent now, when I'm working with clients, is that my favorite part is that when our clients treat us as trusted advisors, because we're here to support them to achieve their goals. That's the best, right? Because it's not only them against us, it's us with them, reviewing and helping them. And we are completely committed to their success. So that's the nice part of it.
So after we the client sends the 10% deposit, and the removal of conditions, and it's officially sold, and there's a commitment, what would be the next stage from there?
So essentially, once everything is committed to, big congratulations, moving forward. We'd enter kind of into what we would call a pre-construction phase of the experience. So at times there could be, a gap in time before we actually see any action in the field with some of the purpose-built projects, as it does take some time depending upon each project where they're at that point of acquisition, whether it would be in the permitting stages, if it's already in construction stages. In some cases, if we're an unregistered land, there's still going to be an extension of time where there will be no action in the field right after that unconditional commitment stage. In saying that, there are still quite a few steps that we would be giving attention. One of the things that we work alongside on the support side is to ensure, we're getting deposit receipts from the builder, going registered into the third-party warranty programs. We're going through an introductory phase, even with our own support team, and helping each investor understand kind of how they can build their boots on the ground team throughout the pre-construction and into the construction phase. Discussing, not necessarily needing to choose their representatives, but talking about legal representation, talking about property management companies. Essentially an investor would have a good idea as to who they've chosen to work with as a trusted advisor on the financing side. But we're always going to have contact and kind of provide that support from the representation or the representative's point of view. As a team, having the extension of a project management that, again, has helped kind of establish the offerings. There's communication with our support staff as well, just to ensure that there are any changes in expectations, whether it's going to be adjustments to the project, to the land, to the timelines. We're able to help ensure that those conversations are happening to then keep the investor up to speed and up to date as to what the status of that project would look like. As we do move forward into the actual construction phase, we as a team do meet with the builder a minimum once every 4 weeks, so that we have a pulse check as to where projects are at when they are in the field. This is just a really helpful way to ensure that expectations, as they were initially set for the investor, it's a pulse check to see if everything is still as we had initially anticipated it to be. It's not always going to be that way in construction. There are a lot of variables that we don't have control over, different stages one after the other, as we would hope. But that's where just the consistency and the commitment to that collaborative approach with the client, with the investor, with their team as well, that is something that we're committed to. So yeah, having those monthly meetings and then providing our investor clients with those updates just help ensure that everything is in place as we move along in the progress of the project. So that's kind of, I guess, talking about more so the pre-construction into the construction phase. Some investors do appreciate the opportunity or want to take advantage of visiting Edmonton and Edmonton and area, depending on where their project is located, to do a site tour. There's different stages in construction that do offer some opportunities to see a project at a certain stage that you'll never see it in ever again. Most often that would come before drywall is put up inside the home, but again, not mandatory. Our team is here to offer support on providing interior, exterior photos as requested. But again, these are just different things that our team can commit to. But the big one being the communication is to ensure that there are very few surprises, or as little surprises as possible, and that expectations can be maintained as they do oftentimes change throughout that process. So.
Yeah, I'd add to that as well, is because the one thing that's really why we're hiring an expert in the construction with the builder to build is because there are so many variables for change through the construction timeline. That industry has a lot of swings and has a lot of moments where, especially in the spring, everyone's putting in their permits, and so there's so many swings of times and what have you, that the other part of it, in a very popular finance product, is obviously MLI Select, and we're trying to kind of coordinate the timing for application and the timing with construction. So I use a funny sort of silly analogy of it's like landing a jet on a postage stamp a lot of times. We're trying to coordinate those timings, and that monthly communication, it definitely helps with making sure that all those timelines are as succinct as possible, so that ongoing support and evaluation of timelines, what's going on, and support on the financing timelines as well, I see from the team is pivotal to make sure that everything works as best as possible. So communication is so important, and I'm thankful that our team prioritizes that, and for sure, because obviously decisions sometimes have to be made through that time, and so timely information is important, obviously, to be best on those decisions. So
and I'm sure the questions coming up for anyone watching right now is roughly what's kind of the range of timelines for projects on the quicker side and then on the longer side, and then what would be kind of average, and then also there's going to be an estimated completion date set out at contract stage. What can be the buffer, either quicker or any delays that come up? What kind of does that look like? Of course, it's hard to predict, but in general speaking, with our history and our experience, what does that look like roughly?
So it's a very challenging question because usually the timelines set on the condition removal. When conditions are removed, that project, as Kellen alluded to at the beginning, it's like could be removing conditions when there's unregistered land. It could be removing conditions when the project's already under construction in a certain stage of construction. So that timeline really changes. So what I'll primarily focus on is just the construction timelines. So typically when we do have registration on land, so I'll note that because that's a pivotal point, I would say we're usually in, a 10-month period, approximately 10 to 12-month period from that point. But if it is something where permits are already received and they're just sitting on a file ready to go, that could be 6 to 8 months, or but if it's in unregistered land, where a lot of times, again, we're mentioned that we're so early in the process when we're evaluating projects together that sometimes in situations we might be waiting 3 or 4 months for registration before we can even go to permits. And what land registration means is that for the most part, what the developers put forward as a proposed usage of land is being evaluated at the city. And for the most part, because there's obviously a history of doing this multiple times over years, we're pretty sure of things, so we can kind of get ahead of it, of like how we want to utilize the land, so we can sort of sell into unregistered land and have some commitments ahead of time. So with that said, that timeline really is something that, again, what we were talking about is that sort of that ongoing communication about making sure our financing and the course of construction are lining up and succinct. So that's why we're here, right? We're here to make, as sort of complicated as that response or answer is, that's what we're here for, is to make sure that is simple and we provide that direction. Because you don't need to understand all those aspects of things, but we can help you, tap you on the shoulder and be a part of that discussion, that hey, there's some action required here to really keep things going, and it's sort of accountable to that process. And so does that make sense, or should I add, is there anything additional I need to add to that? Kellen, from your experience and your, because for when we're doing the updates, do you would say those timelines are predominantly accurate?
Yeah, and I wouldn't honestly like to I wouldn't really like to put a timeline to anything. Hopefully during those initial stages of opportunity review, we're able to paint a bit of a picture on where that project is at its current stage, whether it is in that pre-registered area where it might be 18 months from now, but where we don't anticipate a construction date to start for 3 to 6 months. When there's more stages and steps of that process that need to go on, the opportunity for that timeline to vary increases. Whereas if it is a little bit more predetermined on services being done, and we're registered, ready to just get the construction permits and hit the ground, that becomes a little bit more of a defined timeline. But I think one of the things that we like to provide that support and initially discover at those early stages is to what a preferred timeline, if there is one, that an investor would be most likely to explore and want to see. So oftentimes we do have opportunities that fit those different timelines within the new construction options or opportunities. So
especially when we're in markets where there is sort of passive appreciation, your capital's sort of working for you, and you are getting passive appreciation over that time waiting. Because a lot of times when we're selling and the closing timelines on some of those situations, it's gone up in price. And then on the other side of things, when you're kind of something that's already ready off the shelf, ready to go, you have a quicker turnaround time. And obviously quicker realization on your capital because it's going to be renting out in 6 months rather, so there's sort of pros and cons to each. And back to your point, what's the best fit for people, what's their comfort with, right? So people that don't want to bank on sort of the price going up and stuff like that, maybe want to get into something quicker. And then the people that are like, yeah, no, I see where the market's headed and that's cool. But, by the time I close, it's probably worth more money, which has definitely been a lot of that over the last 3-4 years. So there's pros and cons to each. So like I say, back to your point on that's sort of evaluated at during your opportunity reviews on timelines and, sort of maybe part of your risk assessment, for lack of better terminology, of what people feel comfortable with. So
yeah, it depends on the client too. A client might be offloading a rental or a primary, or dividends checks are coming. So that's many different scenarios, and that's why we do the discovery call and kind of really hone in on those types of questions. Okay, great. So moving along, I guess one question comes to mind is, for a client, it's remove conditions. You get builder updates about every 4 weeks. When can the client expect an update from our team?
I think that would be probably best established even on that relationship between each individual agent or representative and that investor. When we talk about the different stages of pre-construction and construction, having those updates once a month from the builder is helpful for us to maintain just where the expectations are, keeping in mind where really the finish line is. And although that can't be and will not be determined until the very latter stages of construction, our commitment is just to ensure that we're painting a picture that allows, like I said, no surprises or very few surprises. There are times in the pre-construction and construction phase where in that month timeline, there will not be any changes to update. So sometimes we can, I guess, establish a little bit of the needs and wants of each individual investor, that if they would like to have an update every single month or every 6 weeks, that's something that our team would be able to commit to. I use 6 weeks because oftentimes different times of the year, if there's someone who isn't present for a meeting, they may not get that information at the exact same time. However, but those are kind of the expectations that we can set, and that commitment to each individual investor to provide them with that timeline of support and with that update. But yeah, I think that's best established at the early stages of that relationship, where just setting up that expectation time for when they would get those updates. But at the very least, we're meeting with the builder hopefully every 4 to 6 weeks, where we will be able to get a pulse check on where each individual project is at.
Yeah, I agree. Like, we have the information on whether the relevant information to pass along to the client is sort of based upon that relationship between the agent working with the client and the client themselves on their preference. A lot of times what I've seen is, like, it's less about where it is at a construction and when it's going to be done and how far are we from that projected completion that might be in the purchase agreement. And I'll just note, because you did touch on that, Luke, a little bit earlier, is like, we have this proposed timeline in the contract. Very rarely that's what things are at. Like, just it's a projected timeline based upon, like I already alluded to, there's so many variables. Where are we in the life cycle of the construction project that plays? And so a lot of that is speculative at best. So aligning and evaluating the deviation between what the contract says and what the real time projections are, that historically has been more of what it's like, great, where we've got rough-ins happening, that to some clients is very important. So that's hence why, back to Kellen's point, is that some information really important to the client, then we'll pass it along. If it is more about what does this mean as far as when we're closing, then that's more of what we're looking for. And that becomes a lot, obviously, as expected, gets a lot more clear as we get closer to completing the project. The initial stages, there can be some major deviation, especially around framing stages and different things like that, where builders could be waiting for, have foundations completed, but waiting for months, waiting for a framer to pick up the project to get to it, because they got a backlog, which is exactly the state as of right now in August 2024. So yeah.
Also a good time, and we're with the personalization of how those updates come through. I've worked with different investors where the status of the project isn't important, but understanding what market values are at, revisiting what expectations are for rentals, what the statistics are. Those are actually more of the, I guess, desired touch points as opposed to what's happening in the field outside of what is, what does that finish line timeline look like? So we can really personalize what those updates look like based off of the needs and wants of each investor. So
awesome. So when the client removes conditions, they send their deposit. What would be the next action item for them later in the construction process? What's the next trigger point for them to execute, whether it's hiring a property manager, financing, deciding on a lawyer? What would be the next stage for them?
I guess that's when they would be getting their possession letter, right? So we're getting down to the finish line, which is a pretty exciting time for the investor, but it's important, and we try to support as much as possible to make sure that they are on track, that they've got all that's needed to be into their lender, all the papers work is signed. They know what lawyer they're going to be using is important. And then, of course, also they will be needing a property manager, especially if they're from out of province. And those are all very important things for the final. Property management, depending if you're going to be coming in for your pre-occupancy walkthroughs and your key release, you need to have a property manager that you're going to trust to be your eyes and ears here that are going to do those for you as well. And then start down the path for finding the best tenants possible for your investment.
There's a lot of well with that possession letter, I would say, that I see quite often, as far as it's usually the trigger point for now we're on the clock. And the one thing, very thankful we have the relationships we do, is because typically that's a 35-day notice. And as we've seen that a lot of times getting more time on those possession letters, which we've been moving towards to, in some cases, almost double the timeline, to really helps, again, set up for success, because obviously all the important people that are involved, from legal to property management to financing, the more time they have to work with, the more successful they are. It's less rushed, right? So they can utilize the best resources internally and obviously just accommodates more timelines on planning and what have you. So but that's typically when a possession letter, as you noted, is received. It's sort of, we're on the clock towards a timeline of closing. So a lot of those things are, and further to note, as I've seen, maybe Kellen can speak to this a little bit more, but around having a trusted property manager, because we do want to make sure that we have a proper documentation to support the power of attorney for that. So
for sure, yeah, no, and by no means is it just a trigger once that the possession letter has been received that now we're finally circling back to help the investor kind of go back to that collaboration to help them through the rest of the process, as that communication is ongoing throughout the whole construction phase. Again, what a possession letter signifies is the builder's confirmation and commitment to handing over keys and completion at that point in time. We're able to maybe gauge a little bit better as the latter stages of construction begin, where we can help to establish and create that boots on the ground team for the investor in whatever capacity they need. But yeah, as you alluded to, Shane, just there are some additional documents and oftentimes steps that go into that process, whether that's through the legal side, making that connection, and not only just limited to the legal, the property management, as well as the financing, but looking at insurance brokers, looking at utility providers, as there are a lot of different, I guess, considerations for investors to look at in Alberta specifically, as opposed to maybe their home province. So I think the capacity to provide that full level of support is what we strive for and aim for, and our team has a lot of experience in doing that, and in so many different different, I guess, avenues or just different parts of the new construction industry. It just helps give us a little bit more of that capability and capacity to provide support. Like I said, through that initial pre-construction to the construction phase, and now in the final stages before completion, as kind of Heather alluded to. So yeah, we're here for the long run.
Yeah, and when you mentioned that too, Kellen, like the big thing is something we've learned on these bigger deals is we're actually checking in on financing way before possession letters. So that's something you're going to hear from us at least monthly. We're checking in where the COI is, which is your certificate of insurance. That can take some time. So we're kind of hand-holding you throughout that financing process just to make sure that we're not rushing when the possession letter comes. We want to make sure everything is lined up for you. So constant contact with your lender. We might be contacting them on your behalf sometimes just to figure out what's going on. We really are focused on kind of keeping you on track because if we're not prepared, your possession letter comes and you just start talking about financing or getting them on track, we're already a month or two behind. So we're really, really on top of that.
And those timelines are always changing. So we're helping you adjust. I mean, the benefit for our team is we have a lot of clients and we see how things evolve. They either take longer or they're quicker, and your certificate of insurance does have an expiry. So we don't want to get too soon. We also don't want to get too late. So there's some juggling there. But that's where we, maybe it'll tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, it's time to submit your application. Of course, depending on your financing product, right now in our markets, CMHC commercial financing, that's taken a couple of months. That's been a 6-month wait list. So it depends on where we're in the market as to when we should be submitting that. So I'd say that's probably the first stage for a lot of clients as a next action item. And then after that would be hiring a property management team. If you don't have one already, if this is your first go at it, which it would be, and then later on be legal, probably somewhat in that order.
Yeah, the property management, actually, we've had a few clients lately that the lender's phoning to ask information about the property management company, and that's even contingent for their financing. So it is a very important step as well.
That's right.
You're right.
Okay, let's move on to, I guess, closing stage. So we have our possession letter. We're coming up for closing. If it's a scenario where we can get early access to the building for showings, we absolutely will. Or maybe we have a client that's willing to, that's maybe further along, and we can maybe use that building to do showings, as our AOF community is very generous that way. We're all helping each other. What would be the next steps for property management? For example, warranty visits and pre-possession walkthroughs.
Right. So it's back to making sure you have a good team of property management company to work with that you can feel comfortable. If you're not able to come and do those yourself, you definitely want somebody that's got some experience in what to look for in pre-occupancy walkthroughs, and as well as that's going to follow through with the warranty, monitor what needs to be covered by warranty, and making sure it's addressed as soon as possible with the builder.
Moving backwards a little bit, but just as we prepare for that possession, we're ensuring that there is clarity on whether an investor would like to be present for any of the pre-occupancy or pre-occupancy or closing possession key release appointments. If not, we are assisting with, assisting them with putting together a proxy or power of attorney form to ensure that their property management company can sign or act on their behalf for those appointments, as that's required for when you're going through the certificate of possession and submitting it to the third-party warranty program. So there needs to be a proper proxy or individual in place should the investor themselves not want to be present. So getting prepared and setting expectations around what those appointments are, the timeline commitments to them, leading up to getting the lawyer documents, their appointments, again, for remote investors, depending upon some of the relations with the lawyers, they may be coming into town as well to complete their documents, or they'd be completing them remotely. You know, a lot of the legal representatives that we would recommend to our remote investors, they have a lot of experience of working with our team, working with brand new construction. So they are also very well spoken in this space and are a great asset for our investor clients when it comes to closing. But yeah, then moving forward into what those, you know, appointments look like for pre-occupancy and closing, working with the property management company, as Heather had alluded to, just to ensure that there's kind of a consistency of understanding on what those appointments represent, and you know what the expectations look like for a pre-occupancy walkthrough, as well as what a possession and key release would look like. Because sometimes when there's too many cooks in the kitchen, there's a little bit of a loss to the understanding as to what is being provided by the builder and what their expectations are, as well as their commitments to move forward. So regardless of an investor being in town, which again is a really unique experience, been a part of a few of those as well myself with investors, to see the finished product is really unique. But having you know, the representation from property managed there with you, as they will be the ones overseeing and working with your future tenants, I think is a key asset that that we can work alongside the builders with as well. But it just shows that overall level of collaboration to ensure that you're seeing that firsthand experience, the finished product. Whether you can be there or not, that it really isn't important. Your team will be here to support you. It's just, again, we do need to establish and want to establish a little bit of where those expectations look like for those appointments and really what they represent.
I'd probably add on to that as well, as far as the important point is collaborative with everyone, because having a property manager that's predominantly worked with product that's sitting there finished or years old versus a property manager that has experience with new construction, because they're quite different. You know, obviously property managers that are contending with older product are more dealing with some maintenance issues rather than warranty issues, or they're dealing with you know, sort of service requests rather than warranty issues. So having a property manager that has experience with new construction and able to maintain a good, healthy relationship with the service and warranty provider with the home builder is really important, because it is a collaborative approach to make sure that access is permitted. There's going to be seasonal items. There's going to be deficiencies over the course of a year, because this is a new build. The construction, we live in you know, a northern climate, so there's a lot of shifts and cracks and nail pops will happen. That's just inevitable. So we're going to have to contend with those, and obviously it might be a little bit of a situation for access for the tenants, or however we contend with that. But working collaboratively together to kind of get that dealt with through the service and warranty period is important. It's very important. So I note that, because there's always some items that need to be addressed, whether they're seasonal or what have you, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining expectations, as Kellen's alluded to, and not only just with the investor or landlord, but also with the tenants, and communicating, you know, how to align their expectations around what moving into a brand new, beautiful home looks like for the first year or so, right? It's there are some things that need to be addressed through that period, and their expertise and experience with a good property manager can kind of walk through that, because it's kind of first year, got to work through some of those things, but then for the next, you know, 10 years, we're good to go. So it's a little different process, right? So
yeah, let's jump into that. So how many walkthroughs are there in total? There's one pre-possession, one at completion for closing, correct? And then how many warranty walkthroughs would there be in the first year?
I guess I could chime in quickly on that. Depends on the warranty provider, to be fair. Some builders have different warranty providers, and sometimes it's at the request of the client, and sometimes it's a requirement of the warranty provider. So to explain that a little bit more, there's certain warranty providers where if the client doesn't request any of the repairs or anything like that, because they assume that everything's good versus some of the warranty providers, it's just a sort of part of the process. So that's why, again, alluding to property managers that are familiar with new construction and obviously the warranty providers for that. Now, thankfully, we work with builders that sort of are pretty consistent with that process. But typically, I would say there's a shortly after possession. Now, that can be 1 month, that could be 2 months. Walk through and we try to address some of the initial deficiencies and some of the things that might have carried over from the post possession, and then coming closer to a 1-year warranty period. There's a time where you try to kind of get those last things, like I say, the key items that can happen from the shifts in the structure over the course of the first year and stuff like that. Get those, the nail pops, any of the drywall cracking and stuff that is quite common in the first year. So that's typically additional to. That's without saying, and maybe Heather can speak this a little more about any of the sort of prescribed walkthroughs associated with the property management process versus what the home builder process is, if that makes sense. So
yeah, we try and do a walkthrough at 3 months, 6 months, and then at 11 months. If there's any concerns that arise, of course, we go more often than that. But those are kind of the earmarks that we try and make sure we're covering, that everything is going okay with the home. We sometimes have tenants where they are not letting us know when there's an issue, even though it's clear they should. So it's good if we can get in there and make sure that's not the case and that the warranty is covering anything going on in there.
So a combination of the tenants ideally giving you a list of their own deficiencies, but also, you know, going in and doing a walkthrough yourself to see if you can catch anything else.
Yeah,
would be the rest of it.
Reporting everything, because it's funny how some don't know that that's not normal. Your tap is dripping, right? So yeah, to make sure that we're getting those covered for sure.
Yeah, more eyes the better. Awesome. All right, so let's say we've closed, we've done warranty walkthroughs, we have tenants in place. 5, 10, 15, 20 years go by, however long that client decides they want to hold for them, and they say, you know what, for one reason or another, it's their time to exit and they want to sell the property or the building. What kind of options do they have?
You've got really two different options. You can either go the private route or the MLS route, and it really depends on what the market's doing at that time. We can take a look at the most up-to-date information that we've got as real estate agents available to us. We have in-depth market knowledge on how things are moving. And it depends on whether it's a multifamily type of product or whether it's a single family type of product. In this case, you're probably better off to take that a good look at the private route first initially, just to see, you know, when you're dealing with tenants, you're dealing with a lot of moving parts. In some cases, you've got 6 different tenants or 8 or a multiple of that. You've got a lot of moving parts to kind of get everybody on board to facilitate those showings. And we find that quite often the private route, we've got a large number of investors that are looking for products like this that would be able to come in and buy them without having to put your tenants through that stress and duress of putting it on the market and having random people walk through.
Yeah, like we love to help our clients go over the different options that you have available to you. And there's no perfect time, so it's always good to reach out. We have clients tend to reach out once a year when they're considering things, and we'll go through the latest numbers to go through the different options. Why you want to use us, though, is we're just so good at dealing with the tenants. We understand that there are people. We try and coordinate and make it as easy as possible for them. And most of our clients really do care about their tenants, so they want to make sure that the transaction goes as smooth as possible. We'll go through the various different options. Like Drew mentioned, the market can change, and sometimes there's creative ways to sell these properties that are even more beneficial for our clients. So it's always really good to check in with us. We'll go through the, what do we call it, Drew, 2 or 3 pronged approach, the different types of ways we can sell, and figure out what's the most comfortable. It's usually, it can be even a mixture of both, where we offer it privately first, and then we pivot it into like a MLS sale. But we're really happy to help and go through the different levels of a sales transaction too, because they are different depending on the type of property that you have. And yeah, I think we'd be happy to help you sell your property when you're ready, because usually you're not in a hurry to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah, these are usually at minimum 5 to 10 year buy and hold strategy. Some will hold them forever, some will offload them earlier, so it depends on the person. But yeah, I would say in my experience, I've seen usually you have 2 to 3 options on how you want to sell. It obviously depends on that, you know, where we're at in the market cycle, where we're at for price. Whatever lending products are available at that time will depend if it's still a fit for an investor. But my favorite part about this type of product, it's very versatile, where likely it's going to be an investor that picks it up, but for whatever reason, you know, the investment landscape doesn't work at that time. They can work for homeowners that need a mortgage helper, or a multi-generational family that's looking for a couple of suites. So there are many angles and exit strategies for this style of product, and that's what we like to see in our project. So
yeah, and you may just be looking even to have a number, because potentially you're looking to refinance and you're wondering, what is my property worth as well? So kind of fits in the same bucket, and reach out to us and we're happy to help.
I'd additionally note is, especially over the years, I've seen obviously projects that we put together being sold. When we've conceived and considered on the product, and I like to say it's an evolutionary process that happens at least annually, reviewing plans and reviewing everything, is that when we have been the one that put it together and have, you know, the initial development of the marketing collateral, development of the plans, and understand it, just have a little more thorough knowledge of the project and the product. I think that kind of puts that additional benefit, because we know the builder, we know the plan, we know probably have the initial photos from this or videos from it. So a lot of that work that we put together initially can be leveraged into the sale in the future, which I think overall just is an added value, because we're familiar with the community, we're familiar with you know, the project in holistically. So that's it's a little bit different, I would say, than, you know, and this is why a lot of realtors are resident experts of a specific community or specific areas, so that they have the, you know, the speaking points and touch points. And with us, I don't think you could have a more holistic knowledge than being the ones that were the origin story of that particular investment opportunity. So.
All right, guys. Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.